Chairman Kinski, YouTube is live.
Okay, this is, I'll call the meeting to order. This is Joint Appropriations Committee, Tuesday, January 31, 2023, 8 a.m. Call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Garu. Senator Nethercott.
Excused.
Senator Salzar. And Chairman Kinski.
Here. We have,
Senate SAC.
oh, excuse me, yeah, Senate Appropriations. We have 3 bills for our consideration. The first of which is SF 132, Study of K-12 Education Program, and Senator Ellis, welcome and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senators, you have before you Senate File 132, and I will try and give you the short version. I have another committee meeting and another bill, so I will try and move through this as quick as possible. But this is a request for an appropriation to do a study. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the basket of goods. You have this giant sheet. This is just a spreadsheet that I put together, but you'll see in the upper left-hand column a list of all the items that are currently in the basket. We have reading, language arts, social studies, math, science, fine and performing arts, physical education, health and safety, humanities, career vocational education, foreign cultures and language, government and civics, and computer science. You'll recall a few years ago, several years ago now, the last time we really messed with the baskets was when we added computer science. And at the time, there was a lot of resistance, people saying there just isn't enough room in the day. We cannot fit this in. So we hear that a lot in the Education Committee. And so this is a bill to really try and address that. What is going on in the day-to-day lives of our kids? So if you follow those content and performance standards on the bottom of this sheet, I've added just kind of extra requirements that you find in this particular section. You'll see the Common Core of skills, problem solving, interpersonal communications, computational thinking, critical thinking, creativity, and life skills, which includes personal financial management skills. On the bottom there, I've listed kind of how some of these correlate. So in the pink, you'll see that we have a requirement under 21-9-101B Romanet 2. We say for grades 1 through 8, reading, writing, and math shall be emphasized. So in thinking about my kids' day-to-day life, if you go up to the upper right-hand part of your spreadsheet, my kids get daily instruction in reading, writing, and math. But when it comes to science, when it comes to some of these other things, art, PE, they get those not necessarily every day, sometimes weekly. And so what this is trying to do is synthesize that kindergarten day a little bit better, the first grade day. So that if we wanted to add something like computer science, we could see, are we adding too much rigor in math with our standards? Years ago, I visited with the liaison who worked with the state board in the Department of Education. And he said, we adopted some of the most rigorous math standards in the country. And so I thought, well, if we wanted to add computer science as a legislator, wouldn't it be helpful if we could make that calculation of, how about you guys ease up on the rigor with math? And that way we can add computer science. So right now, our content and performance standards are all written by subject rather than by grade band. So this study would ask the Department of Education and the state superintendent to start synthesizing those days a little bit better by grade rather than by subject. And so the goal of this too is to find some efficiencies. Where can we where can we have like some cross-discipline instruction that covers both math and reading lessons? So I could go on about this forever. I've given this a lot of thought over the years. But the goal of it too is also just to kind of look at what's in our basket. You'll see that we have government and civics as a standalone item in the basket, but that's the content and performance standards for it are actually under social studies. You'll see that we don't have any content and performance standards for humanities. And even in the basket of skills, we have in there a mandate that include personal financial management skills. But if you take a survey or visit with people I know that work in this space, there's a lot of bankers in Wyoming that actually volunteer their time to teach these classes, but it's not even evenly distributed in the state. So even in Cheyenne, among our 3 high schools, not all of them offer a personal financial management class. And so I think when we added this to the basket of skills, I think the legislature's expectation was that this would be somewhat mandatory. But because it's kind of thrown in this list, it's been treated more as an elective. So hopefully through this study, we can start deciphering what is, when the legislature adds something, when they don't add something, how are the districts supposed to teach? How are they supposed to approach it? And again, just looking for some efficiencies. Another example I'd say is we've had a lot of discussion about the importance of early literacy in K through 3 in particular. So I have a fourth grader and I was helping her with her math, and so much of her study.
That's brave and bold of you.
Oh, very. She's learning fractions. So when she's studying a particular subject, she does fine when it's broken out as an equation. But the second you put it in a word problem, Karen has 1.5 yards of ribbon, Susie has 2 yards of ribbon, and just the word problem, that's where she gets lost. But when she takes the test, she gets dinged on it's an indicator of how poor her math skills are. When in fact, it's not math that's the problem, it's the reading. So that's another goal of this, is maybe some more preciser look at how we approach some of these subject areas. So the bill is pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman. It would instruct the State Board of Education on page 2, lines 1 through 7, to start publishing their uniform content and performance standards based on, in a manner that allows them to identify all standards across all content areas by grade level. And then section 2 would be the study. You'll see that, paragraph A would put the state superintendent in charge of this. I visited with her and they've asked for some amendments. And so the first 2 items would be examine the Common Core of knowledge and skills to ensure that all students are provided with the opportunity to acquire sufficient knowledge and skills. Moving on to page 2, this isn't a complicated bill. Romanet 2 would require, yes.
If
Senator.
I can, we just look at the appropriation.
Oh, okay.
So
Perfect.
we can't pass judgment on the bill per se, but the question I had is, how does this jive with the governor's RIDE initiative that just got completed?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, great question. So the governor, I think, has been looking at these issues. Separate from that, I don't know exactly on RIDE. I think it would fit nicely into some of the recommendations. But in visiting with the state board, they've been working years on developing profile of a graduate. Right now, that's kind of a key piece that's missing in this conversation, is what's Wyoming's expectation for our high school graduates. And so this would be a way to kind of nudge into that discussion. I think the state board is already looking at moving in this direction, but this would, I think, provide a lot more information so that they could actually get this work done. So I think it fits nicely.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, so this curriculum, if you will, is for the public schools and the Indian schools also?
Mr. Chairman, this would be for any Wyoming K through 12 public school. On the reservation, there are schools that operate that are under the full umbrella of what Wyoming offers. There is one school, the St. Stephen's Indian School, that is administered by the Bureau of Indian Education. So this wouldn't apply to that, to St. Stephen's.
Other questions? Well, I've looked at the state content standards, and it's a pretty good piece of work, but you're right, it's pretty thick. I mean, it's, by each subject, the expectation of competent or proficiency in various areas by grade, just incredible. So I'm with you. It needs to be, we need to lighten up the thumb on the scale somewhere.
And Mr. Chairman, another example would be, in the extra requirements, we have, in the green notes that I put, it says all school districts shall provide instruction in foreign language K through 2 through standards promulgated by the state board. If you read the state board standards, they're written as though you're taking foreign language or world language, as we change the terminology, as a 7th or 8th grader. If you read it, it says, one of your proficiencies is your sentence structure, your paragraph structure. That's not written for a kindergartner who's learning how to write. So I've talked to the state board about this numerous times. How do we start meaningfully introducing foreign language or world languages in those younger grades? And that's something we hear all the time. The day is full. There's too much in the basket. So this, an opportunity would be here. Do we need to learn foreign language just as a standalone subject in kindergarten? Or is there a way to incorporate elements of world languages, like learning the colors while you're in an art class in a different language, or learning different verbs like jump or run while you're in PE class? So that's how I think we're trying to figure out. I think there's just a lot of opportunity to really synthesize some of these areas so that it doesn't feel so heavy on the kids during the day, but that they're getting a more rich experience.
The figure is $72,000. Did that come from the Department of Education? That's what they figured they'd need.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And I think that, I've been thinking about this bill for years. I've been thinking about this issue for years. I've tried to come up with the solution on my own, and I do think that they'll need to hire a consultant who can really kind of examine how to put this all together properly.
Committee? Questions? Questions? All right, let me open it up for agency comment. Any agency comment? Public comment? Anybody on the Zoom? Okay, closed comment. It's to the committee.
Move the bill.
Second, discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Nethercutt, Senator Salzar, and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Thank you, Senator Ellis. Good luck on your next meeting. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 120, the Educational Freedom Act. Senator Barlow, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. While you read Senate File 120, I think you read the last bill's title. So this should be Senate File 120, Restoration of Civil Rights.
Oh, I've got, you know, on here I have SF 20 Educational Freedom Act. I'm sorry, my apologies.
Nope, it's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify that I think you just passed.
Restoration of Civil Rights. All right, please,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
please, Senator Nethercutt.
If I may, I don't think that this bill is noticed for today.
I noticed SF 120. And I think I announced this Educational Freedom Act, but I notice re-referrals as a courtesy to the floor anyway. We don't require notice on re-referrals. It's just on the initial committee.
Yeah, so just for clarity on the agenda, yeah, it looks like Senate File 120 is there. It's titled improperly.
Yeah, correct.
That's the confusion. Thanks.
Is that your understanding of the rules, Senator Barlow? We don't need to notice re-referrals.
Well, certainly on my bill, Mr. Chairman, I don't think you do.
Okay. Well, let's.
No, that actually,
Let's
Mr. Chairman.
let's proceed, and if we
I don't
if
know
we got
how
a
this-
technical error, we'll find a way to fix it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, this bill went through committee number 1. It's obviously a personal bill. And in committee number 1, there's a fiscal note that is accompanying this bill put together by the Department of Corrections, who are represented here today. And what they suggested was, because of the administrative impact, they felt, based on their experience with restoration of voting rights in the past, which we did 5 or 6 years ago, it created a significant burden or a significant workload because of the interest in folks restoring their voting rights. And to date, 3,400 odd citizens of Wyoming have had their voting rights restored. So this bill, for those that will be eligible under the bill, which is the restoration of felony rights, and to be clear to the committee, it also included upon introduction, domestic violence as a restorative process too. That has been stripped from the bill because it became very complex very quickly. And the more I learned I didn't know. And so what the committee committed to do was at least consider that as an interim topic on the domestic violence side. So this bill now only contains, and it's a significant, I mean, it's half of the bill. I understand that, but it only contains the felony restoration of voting rights, of rights. The rest of your
I see,
civil
but
rights.
we don't have that amendment here, but
Mr. Chairman, I think you do, and if you don't, I have copies. It should, Mr. Chairman, the secretary says it's attached to the back of the bill. Standing committee amendment number.
oh, there it
1.
is. Okay, it's ahead of.
So,
the
Mr.
fiscal.
Chairman,
Okay,
so
gotcha.
lines
Thank you.
1 through 26 are removing the domestic violence component from the bill. So that was part of it. And then the second part was a discussion within the committee, and they certainly invited to me whether based on the fiscal note and the testimony of the Department of Corrections, we wanted to bring an amendment to the bill, or do we wanted to, for me as the sponsor, to go in the budget process and bring an amendment to the budget to accommodate this. I felt it was cleaner because this is actually part and parcel to the bill to accomplish the work to bring it as part of the bill. So the committee moved forward with this. The fiscal note was 58,000 something. We rounded to 60,000, and it's for 1 year. If it needs to extend beyond that, of course, they can give that suggestion in the next year's budget, in our next year's budget. So, Mr. Chairman, that, and I'll stand for any questions, but that's the genesis of the rest of the amendment, the top of the page, but the bottom of the page is implementing what this bill would require the Department of Corrections to do should it pass into law. And Mr. Chairman, I mentioned the 3,400 citizens of Wyoming that have had their voting rights restored. What I would anticipate, and I think all of us can understand, there would be a woodwork effect, because now if they can have the entirety of their civil rights restored, meaning their right to hold office, to serve as a juror, and to possess and knowingly use firearms, there's probably folks out there that maybe weren't that as concerned about their voting rights, but they might be more concerned about those other rights. And the complete package might create what in the healthcare world, it's called a woodwork effect. All of a sudden people say, oh yeah, now it's worth it. Now I'm going to go through this process. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope you'll see this as a prudent way to approach this, should this bill come and become law, and not burden our Department of Corrections, which we know already has challenges with staffing at the front line, even and at their administrative level. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for Senator Barlow? Bless you. Senator Anderson, then Senator Nethercott.
So, Mr. Chairman, the amendment did not take away their right to bear arms. They get that restored. Is that what you're saying? You're saying they get all of their rights restored?
Mr. Chairman, so the amendment removed, they were in the original bill, in the introduced bill, there was both felony restoration and domestic violence restoration. It's a misdemeanor crime. It's federal. Both are federal. What the committee decided to do, and actually at my request, was remove the domestic violence component of the bill. So now the bill remains as, if the amendment is adopted on the floor and goes to the floor and is adopted, it is solely a felony restoration, non-violent. I mean, I can go through all the details, and there's a process outlined, meaning you have to have your voting rights restored before you're eligible for the remainder of your rights. And a period of time, a subsequent period of time has passed. So it does, yes, within the bill. So to get clear to the bill, within the bill, it does actually remove your firearm rights right now, which is not done in state law. It's done by federal law. But for an adequate restoration, and this is based on at least my best understanding of case law, including the 10th Circuit, which would be over, if you don't have a complete restoration of rights, gun rights cannot be restored. And so you can't have, that's why a voting rights, just restoring your voting rights, you're not eligible to have any other single right. It has to be in its entirety. So my view was, we take them all away, we can restore them entirely for those folks who would qualify under the auspices of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does that help?
Thank you.
Follow up?
No.
Senator Nethercott. So let's go to the fiscal note, because that's really that's all we can really weigh in on. And I see the fiscal note, it says we're going to ask Department of Corrections, and then we have this agency estimate of administrative impact. There's still no actual appropriation in the bill. And they talk about the duties and there was appropriated $60,000. Oh, okay, good. I got you. But in any event, I'm curious what the increase in the workload is. I mean, I don't do this kind of work, but I have a friend for whom I did it. And it didn't seem like it would be a big burden on the department or the courts. It just, have you looked into that? What the workload burden is? Do you have your own thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, certainly Director Shannon's here from the Department of Corrections. He can outline it more completely. But the administrative impact, I think there is a number, if you go down to the third paragraph, 55,000, et cetera. That's what we based, and there were some supplies in there. There's actually another document, and I apologize. I thought I had it too. That's where the 60,000 came from. I think what you'll find, and Director Shannon will, I think, further elucidate this, is the Department of Corrections records are electronic back to 2010. And from 2010, preceding 2010, they're manual, they're paper. So that requires someone who receives the department who receives an application to start going through files. And that takes time, as you would know, going to a courthouse and going through going to the vault and finding the papers versus being able to. So there is, and I'll let Mr. Shannon describe the number of person hours
Okay.
that they have been through when we passed the voting rights one. And Mr. Chairman, and that's exactly why I am premising this over restoring your voting rights. So we know we've already covered a whole bunch of people, i.e. 3,400 plus. And we don't have to duplicate that. We can just verify that was done, verify there's not a subsequent crime that would make them incompetent for their rights, their voting rights too, and move on. But those folks that would work effect, that's where we may have another 3,000 or 5,000 folks come forward and say, hey, nonviolent felony, I'm eligible to get all my rights back now. I want to initiate this process. And my crime was prior to 2010, which is prior to our electronic record system, the Department of Corrections electronic record system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further questions for Senator Barlow before I bring the agency on? Anything else for Senator Barlow? Thank you, Senator. Agency comment. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Mr. Chairman, Senator committee members, I'm Dan Shannon, Director for the Department of Corrections. Mr. Chairman, I'll be able to report to you based solely on the appropriation request. In 2018, department went back to 2010, back to our data records and reviewed nonviolent felonies for the restoration of voting rights. It took 2 individuals 18 months to complete that test. Prior to that, we have over 34,000 individuals that we would have to search. Now we have to track these individuals down. We also have to do criminal histories. We have to make sure that there's no additional crimes committed. If you read the act, in the act, it indicates those on supervision as well. So you'd complete your probation and parole. That'd be in excess of 70,000 people that potentially we could apply for. It would be 5 years out. So it'd be from 2017, and we have records going back to 1931. And what I'm asking for in the appropriation is a 1-year AWAC position to address that need. Right now, we don't have anyone assigned. We do the task ourselves. And I believe we're going to be overwhelmed with this. The 34 individuals that had their restoration rights presented back to them from 2010 to 2018, those individuals, we still got to go back and check. It's not an automatic because we have to go back and do criminal histories on every one of those. And we have to go and relocate these folks. And these people are no longer on supervision. We have to try to track them down, have them sign the consent forms. Then we do the background histories. It's very time consuming.
Okay, I guess I misunderstood. I thought our restoration was by application. I know there was a debate as to whether we ought to just do it automatically for them, and I thought that failed.
Mr. Chairman, it is by application for those who completed their sentence prior to 2010.
Okay, after that?
After that, it's
you
all
to do it?
Yes, sir. And we've been doing it.
Wow, okay. All right, committee? Any questions for Director Shannon? The $60,000, is it part of the standard budget?
It is not, sir.
And it's 60,000 for 1 year for a contract employee.
It would be 1 year for a contracted employee without benefits, 1 AWAC position. Then I would report back to the committee from there. But I believe hopefully in 1 year we can get that caught up.
Okay. Questions for the director? Questions? Thank you, Director. I learned something today. I
As well.
like to be
Thank
able to
you.
say that.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
it. Further agency comment? Comments from the public? Anybody on Zoom? I'll close the comment. It's to the committee. Moved and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Please, Senator Nethercott.
I have concerns about the bill, but I'll appropriate the funds for the Department of Corrections. I like felonies.
Yeah.
Those in the Senate know.
Yeah, I have some concerns about the bill, but our job, as Senator Nethercott said, is just to weigh in on the appropriation. Further comment from the committee? Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Nethercutt. Senator Salazar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Thank you, Senator Barlow. Really appreciate it. Make sure the title on the notice matches the title on the bill. Our next matter is Senate File 143, Wyoming Freedom Scholarship Act 2. And Senator Steinmetz, welcome and good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Let me know when you're ready for me to begin.
We're ready for you to begin.
All right, well, today I bring you the Wyoming Freedom Scholarship too. And what this bill contemplates doing is setting up educational savings accounts. And we're utilizing the Good Treasurer's Office to administer those contracts between parents and possibly a third-party administrator who would help them apply this program. That it's being done in 9 other states and going on all across the country. Actually, the savings of it is substantial because we're looking at a $6,000 scholarship for kids. There are provisions in the bill that make sure that money is not going directly to parents or students or even family members of the student, because that would not be legal for that to happen. So there's provisions in the bill for that. What I'm here for today is to talk to you about the appropriation, and thankfully the Treasurer's Office is here too, because this is new territory for all of us. And so we want to make sure we get them the support that they need in administering this program, make sure that the dates all work for them as well, and that our communication is good with them, because we know that we're asking them to start a new program here. So basically, the appropriation is for $30 million from the general fund. You can find that on page 32. There is also on page 29 an anticipation that going forward, we would take 50% of the amount of the FMR funds, and you should have a handout on that. The federal mineral royalties last cycle, that was approximately 88 million. So that'd be around 40 to 42 million. The treasurer would receive 5% the first 2 years and 3% thereafter to administer the funds. They might want to tweak that number a little bit and ask for something to stand the program up in the beginning. And I was looking to see the amount of the scholarship is found on page 5. And then if it gets over $30 million and is more than 150% of the amount required to fund all the ESAs, that will dump back into the school foundation program account. So we wouldn't be holding that money over, and that's found on page 6. And somewhere it tells us the percentages of the treasurer's office, how they receive that. It's in here. I'll look for that. But with that, I would, it's on page 17 and it's at the top of page 17. They would receive 5% annually in the first 2 years, and then the maximum of 3%. Yeah, to administer the program. And so that's how we have it set up. I would stand for any questions or ask some of the experts up. We're fortunate to have a representative from Ed Choice here today to tell us if you'd like to hear more about how other states have done this and what the fees have been. All of that, I would let them address that today.
Mr. Chairman, we have the Hathaway program. How is this different from the Hathaway, and why have another program?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, the Hathaway is for college. This provides educational choice and an educational marketplace for kids in school. So it's not specifically to homeschools, but it would be private schools so that parents have the choice of where they'd like to have their kid educated, student, excuse me, not kid.
Mr. Chairman, just ask the same question I've asked before, and just for purposes of defending any actions or creating another account when we're going through the process of eliminating accounts, just response to that piece.
Yes, and you know, there are times when we need to create another account. If the treasurer has a better way to set this up to where it could be administered in one of the larger accounts and it could be a sub account, that would be up to their office. This is just how we chose to set it up beginning.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks. And then why that amount of the appropriation? Are you anticipating high participation or?
It's regarding, we were anticipating maybe 5,000 students. It was just an estimation of what could occur. And that was just 10% of, our population, so.
Senator Nethercutt.
Just one more question, Mr. Chairman. I see on page 3, line 18, reference to a home-based educational program. Just 18. So it's in the definition for eligible student, means a child who is a Wyoming resident, who has not graduated from high school, received a high school equivalency certificate, or completed the equivalent of high school through a home-based educational program. Okay, so this is pre-graduation requirements?
Yes, this
Okay.
is a scholarship for K-12 students to possibly go to private school. And that exempts them, that home-based services, that's homeschooling is exempted out of this bill because they didn't want to be included in it.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, Senator Anderson.
Two questions. Now I have a question on that. Did you say it took the home-based education program out? I thought it put it in.
Mr. Chairman, homeschoolers did not, they can opt in if they want to, but they don't have to be in. The homeschool movement does not want to be forced into this program. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish with that.
Fiscal note, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The administrative impact, I see they've got fiscal year 2023 and 2024, and then the total is the same as fiscal year 2024. Does that mean they're absorbing the 530,000 from 23?
Mr. Chairman, I'll let the treasurer's office speak to that.
Okay, why don't you let the treasurer?
Well, let's anything further for the sponsor before we go to agencies? Senator Salazar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify that too. As a home school parent, yeah, we definitely want to be left out of this. So,
Left out?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we can have that discussion on the floor with regard to the merits of the bill itself. We're just here for the appropriation, I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the general feeling from most home parents.
Senator Nethercutt.
Mr. Chairman, just another quick question associated with state funds. I haven't studied the bill, confession. I've looked at the appropriation before coming, but I haven't studied it in a
Can you
way.
get
but-
closer to your microphone.
Yep.
Can't hear you.
There's currently United Supreme Court cases associated with state dollars going to fund private religious schools. I don't know if this bill even touches on that or is even an irrelevant question. I'm just curious about that big picture. If whether or not these state dollars could be used to go to private religious schools and how that might interplay with the US Supreme Court cases, if it does at all.
Mr. Chairman, we've crafted this bill and Senator Nethercutt in a way for it to be constitutional. And other states are doing the same thing. So yes, it could go to a private school, any private school in the state. And there have been cases, you would be much more familiar with them than I, and the Blaine Amendment, that being overturned. And so there is an opportunity here to expand the tax dollars that have been paid in. But that's the other part of the federal mineral royalties, is those are not specifically designated, they're unrestricted funds. So they're not actually K-12 funds until they go into the account, which is why we're using those and not the funds out of the school foundation program account.
Senator Anderson, the lights on.
Oh, sorry.
No, anything else from the committee, the sponsor? Thank you, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr.
We'll,
Chairman.
we'll go to agency comment. Good morning. And it is a good morning. A little chilly, a little brisk, but sunshine.
The person from Ed Choice, Caitlin, I don't remember your last name. She's one of some of the other states. She's got some of the details on that and the third party administrators. And I'll speak primarily, I think, to the
We know who you are, but just
I'm Kurt Meyer, your state treasurer, and this is Don Williams, our deputy, and Matt Sackett, our policy.
good morning.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. And I'll try to get into the right protocol there, Mr. Chairman. Okay, members of committee. I guess we'll talk a little bit about, as some of you looked at, and especially Senator Anderson, what are you going to do for the first year? Are you going to, take that one on the chin? No, we can't take that one on the chin, Senator Anderson. And I think there's some things that in the bill that I want to see changed. I want to bring in the superintendent in the advisory role, because I'm not in education. I think guys all know how important I feel that the top 5 stay in their own lanes. What I feel our expertise in this is that we can take the money in, we can put it into an account, and we can make sure it's distributed to a third-party administrator. And I'm hoping that this bill gets amended to practically every place that you see the treasurer, there's a third-party administrator, because they can do it much more efficiently than we can. I think Don looked at it as far as, the deputy looked at it. If we are going to stand this up ourselves, we'd need 9 people. And then we'd have to figure out how to get the expertise in the Office of Education. We don't want to be in that position, but a third-party administrator can do it much, much more efficiently. And Caitlin from Ed Choice can tell you what those costs are for different third-party administrators. There's a couple of things in here that could be problematic, just in implementation. One, to be nice to be exempted from the procurement of A&I in putting on a third-party administrator and any consultants that we might need to employ, because that could set this thing back months because of just the delay in that process. But
So just to clarify, currently you can't hire a consultant without getting A&I's blessing.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. However, I don't know that it's a bad idea necessarily to go through the process, only because of the transparency. It is a new program. Because we don't know anything about education, our preference would be to hire a consultant to help us walk through. So we'll have to prepare an RFP for a consultant, let the RFP, it does take a long time, but in order to ensure that we're working with the right people, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, given the fact that we don't have experience in this area. But it does take a long time, that's for sure. So we would want that person, we'd like to hire a consultant and then have that consultant work on the RFP for these third-party administrators. There is a requirement in the bill that there need to be at least three submissions for the RFP. We have a concern that what if we don't get 3 submissions? Are we dead in the water? And in that case, then the treasurer's office will be unable to implement this program at all. So what this consultant would be helpful again to do is to write that RFP, help us select a third-party administrator, craft the rules for the program. Audits are required in this bill. There is hotlines are required in this bill. There is a commission that is set up in this bill. There's a lot to it, and we would definitely need some help with that. The funding is effective immediately. However, All of the rest of the bill in sections 1 and sections 2 are not effective until January 1st, which is where the rules come into. Section 4 does say that we have to craft the rules, but all of the the meat of the bill is in section 1 and section 2, and that's not effective until January 1st. And we're going to need to start this immediately in order to be able to make the deadlines for the third-party administrator to start accepting applications early next year, this time actually in 2024.
So that's where trying to get all of this done in this time period. It's gonna be a push.
So is there something, I mean, why in the treasurer's office would be a question for the sponsor, but is there, I mean, do you know any constitutional reason why this couldn't go to Department of Ed instead of your department?
I think that was because the discussion that Senator Nethercott brought up as far as is this an educational construct, and if it was in the educational department, then it would be tied closer to educational funding. And when you get that overlap, then I think you may indeed have that constitutional problem that Senator Nethercott was brought up. That's what the sponsors indicated to us, and I happen to agree with them in that standpoint. As far as the disposition of taxes, essentially royalties aren't a tax. So you don't, that's a fine gray line is when it's state money, not state money, and it's when it's not a tax. And so that's why he used FMRs, to fund this in part. And I know it's splitting hairs, but it's a hair that I think sometimes gets split.
I thought it was because of restrictions on the Common School Public Land Fund from the Act of Admission.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you would have perhaps some of those funds that could be, a person might have dual duties and be paid with the Act of Admission money. And then you get it, then it gets too muddy, and there may be a link there to roll the program back.
Anything for the committee, anything for the agency? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would just say that yeah, we may need some positions on this, that we don't have any room in our office to house anybody. So there are going to be some, I guess I would say some add-ons from our perspective. And I think you probably should hear from Caitlin I think it'd give you guys a comfort level as far as the ability of a third-party administrator to do this. And I hope that there's going to be an amendment somewhere that practically every place where it says treasurer, you do 3PA, third-party administrator.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further agency comment? I'll open it up to public comment. Good morning. Press. Oh, there, it's on for you already, right?
I'm Caitlin from Ed Choice. As they've mentioned, I've worked closely with the bill sponsors to kind of craft this in a way that would be both constitutional and give you all the most success possible. Probably let you ask as many questions as you want here in a few minutes, but the third-party administrators that have been used in other states allow for treasurer's offices most commonly, but occasionally Department of Education to also administer these programs in the most efficient way possible. They have the best expertise and platforms that allow parents and families to apply for programs, choose education service providers, and kind of the whole basket of goods from start to finish in an incredibly efficient manner, so that from start to finish, the programs can be very efficient. As the treasurer mentioned, that they originally estimated they would need 9 FTEs. And I believe that after discussion yesterday, we realized that they might only need 1 or 2 through using a third-party administrator. So these third-party providers really streamline the process for the state for a very low cost. Looking at several of them, there's 3 or 4 that I've had communications with over the last year, working, or not even full year, 6-7 months working with Ed Choice at different conferences. And it looks like for probably less than $500,000, and that's including the 2 FTEs that the treasurer would potentially use, they could stand up and run your program. So that's for about 5,000 students. The initial cost would be about $220,000 to $300,000 for the stand-up cost and ongoing annual. So, and that's giving you the gambit of everything from allowing people on Marketplace, using like Amazon for online purchases, verification, audits, the call center, all the things that the bill does require. And I took the average of the 3 to 4 major third-party providers and kind of averaged those costs out from the high end to the low end on those. So those were very crude numbers that we got on the fly. So nothing exact, but just trying to give the treasurer a better idea of kind of those, what those third parties can give as far as cost savings for the state. So I did get a chance to kind of look at the estimate as far as what they were thinking that it would cost for the state to run it in versus a third party. So if you have questions beyond that.
Do you have those numbers that you just rattled off in a sheet as to what your estimate based on talking to TPAs, the cost of the program would be?
I can put them together for you if that would be helpful. So
Yeah, I was trying to follow along. I heard 200,000 and something. So
yeah, so 220,000, and the largest one, she gave me really good concrete numbers. It's about 0.5% is the estimate per student, or 0.5% of the total appropriations is what they charge for stand-up, and then $10 per student annually. There's some other fees associated. If you want the call center, if you want online verification, if you want them to be able to do reimbursement. I also took the other 2 to 3 large third-party administrators that have been used in like Arizona, West Virginia, Florida, New Hampshire, some of the other states that have voucher programs, special needs programs, and other smaller scholarship programs, and took their costs as well and averaged them out in $225,000 to $300,000 as
So
average.
besides ESAs, there's states with voucher programs, then there, you said special needs, there must be states that have kind of an ESA for special needs. So there's more than 3 TPAs working in this space.
There are. So, and there are more that are popping up all the time. So
Okay. Interesting.
there are 3 large ones, but there are multiple others that are coming up regularly. So there are 3 that I've had step by step. I like sat down at a computer with them and they walked me through, like, if you were the parent, this is how you would apply on our platform. This is what you would see as a parent, like choosing, like looking at the provider. So if I was a parent and I was looking for a tutoring service, this is how I would choose it. It's very similar to, you know, an online marketplace. And so they've had the opportunity to kind of look at that, because coming from a state where we've had not always the best transparency, I wanted to be able to go back to the lawmakers in my state and say that I've gone through those processes and I've asked the questions, because my reputation matters a lot to me. And so I did that, and they were all gracious enough to sit down and answer those questions. So.
Anything else before I take it to the committee for questions?
Sorry.
Anything else before I have the committee?
Nope, that's it. Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman.
Senator Nethercott and then Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand you helped draft the bill. Is that correct?
I was a part of it. Yes.
And make it constitutional?
Yes. I will say, the attorney that works with Ed Choice was much more a part of that than I was. But yes.
Okay. On page 4, line 7. So a qualified school means a non-governmental primary or secondary school that is located in or that provides educational services in this state. So it's possible that it could be an out-of-state private religious school that's doing online school in Wyoming, potentially. And that does not discriminate on the basis of race, color, which of course is the same as race, national origin, which of course is the same as race in many ways. And so only those are the basis of protections. Can you speak to that more thoroughly as to why the other protected classes are absent?
So that language is taken directly from a US code, and it's what's used in several other school choice pieces of legislation. And they used to actually reference the US code, but as that's changed over the years, they've stopped referencing the code in state statute, and they've actually substituted it in, is my understanding. They're actually making changes to Oklahoma, Texas, and West Virginia's codes, or their school choice legislation this year, and all they're doing is striking the reference to the US code and substituting in the language from it. So I asked the question because I have to track it in other states. I was like, why are we just striking the reference to the US code and substituting the language in? They said it's because of, it makes your state statute update. So that was the answer I was provided.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, please.
what is the US code?
I believe it's USC. I'll have to pull it up, but I can get that for you. So if you'd like
Thank
to
you.
reference it.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, this is the first I've heard, not familiar with TPAs. Are there any TPAs in Kirk County?
So I'm assuming as far as the third-party administrators,
No, never mind. Kirk County did react.
I got lost too.
Yeah.
Okay, I got
Crook
you. I
County
got
did
Chris
react.
Tyler's back there. I got you. Anything else, Senator Anderson?
No,
Okay, Senator
Thank
Nethercutt.
you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That third-party administrator piece, how many third-party administrators are there currently operating in the United States?
total, I could get that number for you exactly. Like I said, there are 3 or 4 substantially large ones. There are also some nonprofits that are starting to formulate. Utah, just their governor signed their bill last Saturday, and they're requiring that it be a nonprofit, which is going to create a little bit more of a difficulty because they're requiring kind of an RFP procurement process, and they're requiring that it be a nonprofit. So there aren't as many of those that have been created. Currently, they are for profits mostly. There are 3 or 4 large ones and several other smaller ones. Some states have administered it completely within, but without being within their aid. So they're creating their own non-government organizations, but I can get you an exact number and a list probably as well, if you'd like that.
I would be interested in that list,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and so there's enough that you're confident with this provision that there will be 3 responses, because Wyoming's small, sometimes these big organizations, we're just not big enough to attract attention.
So it's going to depend on the RFP, of course, regardless of, New Hampshire and Rhode Island are small states, obviously by size, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on the student population. So you're talking about 5,000 students. Utah's bill that just passed was only going to be provide for 5,000 students as well. The Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship in Oklahoma initially only started out with about 700 students. So I
Okay.
can give you the take-up rates. I've got a nice little sheet that shows you the take-up rates in every state for the last 5 to 10 years of school choice programs. And most of them will use third-party administrators. So it's not so much about the population of your state or the size of your state, so much as it is the participation in the program.
Okay, thank you. Further from the committee? Further from the committee? All right, I'll open it up for, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll open it up for further public comment. Further public comment, anybody on Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll close public comment to the committee. Second, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion from the committee. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. I remember I actually, with some others in the other chamber, tried this approach some years ago, and it failed, but I think times have changed. Secondly, I happen to be the father of a 9th grader, and while I probably would not take advantage of this, I do believe that alternative choices are important. And finally, I'm going to be a yes vote because I want to see this kind of discussion on the floor of the Senate. I think there would be actually widespread support for this, but I support it and I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Any further discussion from the committee? None, clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Guru. Senator Guru.
Say again.
No.
Senator Nethercutt. Senator Salzar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Okay. That concludes our business for this morning and an hour early. Or